All right, everybody, I think we'll get started. It's 9:01. Excuse me. Welcome, everybody, to our first conference call of the new year, 2022. This call was going to be a little different than normal. Jim Hallbeisen's on the road and unable to make it on, so we won't be getting his normal current events update. However, we're going to have Matt Schoder on at the beginning. He's going to kind of give an update on the supply chain and pricing stuff going on at the company right now. After that, I think we'll have a short time of questions for him, and then I'll be handling the rest of the call. So we're going to be looking at the Excel version of our Cost and Nutritional Analysis. It's a very easy to use tool that takes a lot of the legwork out of doing the calculations for your cost per acre and nutrient availability. And we're going to be applying that stuff, kind of looking at how other fertilizer prices have changed over the last year. So I have the latest DTN stuff up. We'll discuss that a bit. Look at how much these other products have increased. Look at how growers are still quite competitive. And most importantly, discuss how the growers program can actually increase efficiency in your operation and lower costs significantly to where it can take the sharp edge off of big price increases like this. And so with that said, I think I'll hand it over to you, Matt Schoder. If you want to give us an update on the pricing and supply chain and stuff, that would be great.
All right, thanks, Zach. So certainly always a challenge, but the good news is I'll bring you up to speed in case you were not on the call last Friday morning. We will also have a call tomorrow morning at 9 Eastern. But we were able to purchase 6 loads of diammonium phosphate, which is the biggest problem that we've been having for supply. We purchased these 6 at a very, very high price, but that's what was available, and those are in transit as we speak. So that's the good news. The other good news is every order that we've received at growers, we have material for. We will deliver, no issues. The even better news is we have currently about 25,000 gallons that are still available for orders. So please send your orders in, and we will be able to fill those orders and deliver on a timely basis. The next piece of good news is we did receive some information from our main supplier that we should be able to get more frequent and regular shipments of diammonium phosphate sometime this spring. Certainly that's a little bit up in the air still, but that's much better news than we've received in well over a month from our supplier. So it's good information. It's great to hear. So I'm feeling much more optimistic about our supply and getting it sooner rather than later. So I guess my message is keep the orders coming in, because we anticipate being able to fill all orders without any issue. Now, price is another issue. Certainly, price is still a problem. Availability is better for sure. Price, I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. We can keep our fingers crossed. I hope we don't have to increase again, but you never know. We'll keep you up to date as much as as soon as we know anything. While I'm talking about that, I just want to go over one quick thing just to make sure. Our current price list, I just want to make sure you have the correct one for this period. We're in the January 11th through the February 1st, 6% cash in advance discount. To give you a point of reference to make sure you've got the correct price sheet, the US price sheet for 8,200 gallons should be $15.80. $15.80 is 8,200 gallon price. And the Canada price is 15,520 liters at $5.36. Okay. So those are the correct price lists that are currently in effect as of today. I think that's what I got for you, other than thanks for all your efforts. Thanks for bearing with us with all these crazy price changes, increases. But I'm much more optimistic and keep the orders coming. Okay, Zach, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I think we'll have a brief period. I've got a couple of questions, but we'll see if anybody else does first. So for those of you on a computer or a smartphone, there should be a little microphone in the bottom left-hand corner. If it's got a red line through it and you're muted, so unmute that and then you can speak. For those of you who are on phones, push *6 to unmute yourself. If you have any problems, there's a raise hand button as well along the bottom. So you can do that as well, and one of us will try to unmute you. All right. I'll assume there aren't any questions, but I have a couple for you, Matt. The first one is to give these guys a little bit of perspective on how a lot of companies are handling the price increase. Could you share what you shared with me about the distressed DAP product that you might have been able to get?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. So one of our vendors that we're getting some other material from currently and has been a good vendor to us. One of our vendors, I was kind of reaching out to everybody under the sun, especially, even a few weeks ago. Hey, do you have any DAP? Hey, do you have any DAP? And again, we're looking for the high grade DAP. So it's even tougher to find, right? So this vendor did have some DAP. It turned out to be in a warehouse just down the road from us in Cleveland, Ohio. It was distressed, meaning there's nothing wrong with it. It was DAP just tends to get hard after a certain period of time. It likes to absorb moisture. Well, we're fine with that if the price is correct, because we do have to use a lot of additional labor to be able to break this up and get it into the mix tank. It certainly does cause a lot of additional labor and a lot of pain and suffering for our poor production crew. But in the past, we're able to buy distressed DAP at roughly 40% less than the quote good DAP. So I was expecting a nice price decrease. Well, vendor came back and said, it's roughly going to be 30 to 40% more than this extremely high price I was paying for this material that I just purchased from another vendor. And it only points to one thing is they thought they could get these extremely high prices just because there's a shortage of material. They point blankly increased the price tremendously just because they thought they could. And needless to say, I turned it down. It wasn't that much material anyway. It was only enough to make not even a batch, but still, I politely turned them down and said, look, I'm getting good material that I'm paying an arm and a leg for cheaper than that. So if you could help me out, I'd appreciate it. But no, that was the last I heard from them. So there's definitely a lot of that going on in every respect, with a lot of companies that they're just raising prices just because they can, not necessarily because their prices are going up. Certainly everybody's are. but there are a lot of companies out there that are padding the bottom line. And that's just one example. So
Thanks, Matt. And for those of you that have been on here when Rick has talked about this before, that growers sets the price based upon cost, not based upon padding the bottom line. And so even though we've had to increase our price pretty significantly, it's not because the Matt and Rick and them are looking to inflate the bottom line. It's because the costs have gone up. And I think that stays true to the kind of the grower's model of helping our customers first. My second question, Matt, and I don't know how much of an answer you can give for this, but you mentioned that the supplier of DAP that we normally use, which is the Russian one, that they think they'll be able to resume normal shipments in the spring. Do they have, like, is that because they think that the moratorium that the government's put on nitrogen exports is going to end? Do you have any insight into that?
Unfortunately, no, we don't. We don't have any idea why that has happened, but we will probably in the next week or so. We'll see if we can get some answers. But for now, we know that we should have more regular shipments coming in the spring. So that's the great news.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, Matt. It's a big help.
Anytime. Thanks, Zach.
No problem. All right. Well, then we'll move into the next part of the conference call. So I'm going to continue a bit with the pricing talk. Growers' price has gone up 57% since of the price that it was last year at this time. And that price increase has been broken up. We had two prices increases in the fall, and then the most recent one, which was the largest one as a result of the massive increase in the cost of the new DAP shipments, which is 200% what we were paying for the DAP last year, or over what we were paying the DAP last year. To give you guys, again, some perspective on, for those of you that, some of you would probably know this better than I do. Some of you may not, but DTN publishes an average of, I think, 1,700 retail fertilizer prices, and they do it weekly, or they do it the first week of every month, and then you can compare it year to year. And so if we look at the price of, like, they go by dry and liquid, so you've got DAP, MAP, potash, and urea for the dry, and then 1034O and hydrous, 28% and 32% UAN for the liquid. So if we just let's take DAP, for example, since that's what we were just talking about. Last year, the average price for a ton of DAP was $482. That's the beginning of January 2021. The beginning of January 2022, it had risen to $863. So nearly doubled. Let's look at 1034O, which in parts of, especially kind of the Northern Corn Belt, is a popular starter fertilizer. Beginning of January 2021, it was $464 a ton, and the beginning of this year, it was at $795. So again, getting close to being double. And hydrous, which growers guys don't use, but it has increased the most extravagantly. It went from $470 at the beginning of last year to $1,430 per ton this year. Urea has gone from 368 to 913, more than double. Potash, 369 to 807, more than double. 28% has gone from 209 to 584, again, more than double. And so nobody's happy that growers' price has increased as much as it has, but it's necessary to keep up with costs. And to put it in perspective, it's not anywhere close to what we're seeing in a lot of other fertilizers and these raw materials. I won't share who. He's on the call, and he can make himself known if he desires to. I was told, though, that they usually buy around 5,500 gallons of 28% each year. This year, they've dropped that down to 4,500. Normally, last year when they bought 5,500, they paid 11 grand for it. This year, they dropped it down to 4,500, and they're paying 22 grand for it. And so the prices have gone up astronomically in a lot of cases. In large part, some of it's unavoidable. The supply chain issues, lockdown, stuff like that has a certain impact on this stuff. And so we're going to see these price increases. It's not the end of the story, though. A nice thing about the growers program is that we've always been able to save farmers money because we work efficiently. So that'll kind of come toward the latter end of this call. I'd like to actually move into the CNA, the Cost and Nutritional Analysis. So that's the picture featured in the January of this year for the calendar. Just a picture of the analysis. So I think more guys have had experience with the longhand version than the Excel. So we're going to go just a little bit into the Excel. I'm not going to be doing an exhaustive examples here, but I've written a few down. You guys can see how it works, and you can see how the prices and the nutrient availabilities compare. So I'm going to share my screen. I'll try to talk through it as much as I can for the benefit of those on phones who won't be able to see the screen. But for those who do have computers and smartphones and can see it, please take a look. All right, could somebody with a computer please let me know if you can see that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, so I've already plugged in some numbers here. Basically, for those of you who haven't been exposed to this before, our cost and nutritional analysis, our cost and availability calculator here is designed to show you, break down your cost per acre. So rather than looking at cost per gallon or cost per ton or cost per pound, you're breaking it down into cost per acre, which is a more practical and applicable way of looking at cost. The second part of it is nutrient availability. So we're all applying these nutrients. They're not perfectly available. So what are we getting out of these different kinds of fertilizers? I won't go into great detail now, but this is based on a research paper from 4 different universities that looked at plant response in the first 45 days of growth, depending on how much phosphorus they needed. So this is based on phosphorus. And so you can see here in this column, fertilizer availability index, you have different kinds of liquids, hot ortho seed applied, cold ortho seed applied, 2x2, so forth. You have dry, some other ones. I won't get into manure today. And the most available is hot ortho seed applied. So hot ortho, hot mix, that's what growers is. Ortho is the type of phosphorus in it. It's available form. That's what growers has. And where it's applied matters. Of course, the enemies to fertilization are time and distance. And so when it's as close to where it's needed, then you're going to get better efficiency. Hence the seed applied having higher percentages. Once you figure that out, you can do this for a single product. You can do this for a program. It's versatile and very useful. Then if you look down here, total pounds applied and total pounds of available, you can subtract one from the other and get the amount that was lost. And so when you have inefficient fertilization, some of it's going to be lost to the environment. Hence, we have nutrient pollution in waterways, you get algae blooms, you get all that fun stuff. Also, and probably the most important calculation is if you divide your cost per acre by the total pounds of available nutrition, you can actually get the cost per pound of available nutrition. So how much money are you spending per pound of available nutrition? Now, of course, you want that number to be as low as possible. You don't want to spend money that your plant is not, spend money on fertilizer that your plant's not using. And so I'll give just a brief run through of how to use the Excel. So the way that it's been set up is you can actually input. So let's do growers, for example. I'll delete what I have here. All right, so growers is green. Keep that in mind. I'll stop. Here it is, this column here. So that would be row, this row 26. So right now it's blank. There's nothing in there. But if you fill in this, so rate, we'll say 8 gallons, pounds per gallon. You can see in this little table down here, growers is always 11.4 pounds per gallon. Cost at the 1,000 gallon price is $17.10. And so I've just input those there. And you can see that it's done the calculations in row 26 for me. So the first calculation is not used for cost. It's used for the nutrient availability. That's a total weight of 8 gallons, which is calculated as, excuse me, 91.2 pounds. The cost is calculated automatically. So at 8 gallons per acre at the 1,000-gallon price right now of $17.10, it would be $136.80 per acre. It's very easy to use. The longhand version is great. It's good to know how to use that, but this is a lot less labor intensive. You can do the same for a dry product. I've done potash already. I'll redo that one. So I'll do this so I don't forget. So it was $807 per ton this week, last week, and we'll say 150 pounds. You can see here, this kind of pinkish, dull pinkish row 24, that this is breaking it down into cents per pound, or sorry, dollars per pound. There we go, because it's in tons. And then this is the cost, $60.53 per acre. So this is an effective tool, right? Everybody's thinking price right now. Everything, all the prices have skyrocketed. This is a great tool to actually determine what you're spending per acre, since you sell per acre, you get bushels per acre. And then you can figure out in areas that you can save. And so ignore this number. That's including growers, 1034.0, potash, and 28%. I hope nobody's using all that because you're not going to make any money. I'll go briefly through the nutrient availability table as well. So we'll do it for growers. So this analysis table is only for the purpose of writing down the percent analysis of different kinds of fertilizer. So in growers' case, it's a 10, 20, 10. Now, the beauty of using Excel, the way that it's been set up, it was Matt Schoder that did it actually, thank you, Matt, is that once you've plugged in the numbers in these tables, it does most of the calculations for you. And so we see here, remember that 91.2 from the cost per acre? It's taking that and multiplying it by the percentage of these nutrients. So the percentage of nitrogen, of phosphorus, and of potassium, which is 10, 20, and 10. So 10% of 91.2, 20% of 91.2. Then you're multiplying that by its availability percentage. How available is that? Which a hot ortho seed applied. Now, you're not going to use 8 gallons of growers on the seed, even of corn. Some of that will be foliar applied. But through other studies, we know that it is highly available foliar as well. So we use the same percentage, 95%. And so what we get here in the final column, pounds available, is how much of that growers you've applied is actually available. So you can see that it's very close, 95% of what's in the product. You're losing very little. You're getting what you pay for. Let's do 1034.0. 1034.0 is cold poly 2x2. You're not putting that stuff on the seed. And so cold poly 2x2 right here, that's a 2 element actually. So right here, that's only 10% available. And so you can see out of the, let's see, did I put the, yes. Okay. This is a case of 10 gallons rate of 1034.0, which weighs 116.5 pounds. Out of that 116 pounds, you're getting 1.2 pounds of nitrogen and 4 pounds of phosphorus because the availability is so bad. It's for multiple reasons. 2x2 is, of course, less available than on the seed because the plant has to go out in search of it. 1034.0 is actually also not a clean fertilizer, and so there's impurities in there that are going to harm its uptake. It's also not orthophosphate. Orthophosphate is immediately available. It's in a plant available form. Polyphosphate has to first be converted into orthophosphate in the soil by microbes before it's available to the plant. So you lose some efficiency there. Same, I could do this for dry fertilizer as well. It's also, you'll see right here, dry broadcast, 10%, dry 2x2 is 20, equally low. And so I'm not going to break down all these numbers here, but basically, the more inefficient that your fertilizer is, the more nutrients are lost, and the higher your cost per pound of available nutrition is going to be. In essence, it's paying for 100 pounds of fertility, using 10 of it, and then flushing the other 90 down the drain. It doesn't make any sense, especially when prices are this high. When times are good, prices are low, prices of fertilizers are low, prices of commodities are high. You can get by with this financially pretty well. Environmentally, it has the same effect. It doesn't matter price. But this has always been the beauty of the growers program, is that here's the kind of how I understand it, the adage. When commodity prices are high costs don't matter as much. You're getting by. But very few of us have any control over two things: commodity prices and weather, or just conditions, many conditions, variables affecting your crop. So what happens when commodity prices are low, or big storm comes through and destroys your field, so you don't have any price, you don't have anything to sell, and yet your costs are still there? You still have that massive fertility bill. What happens then? The one thing that we can really control is our inputs. How much are we spending on our inputs? If you're subscribing to a unit in, unit out philosophy regarding crop growth, meaning you need this many pounds of this nutrient to grow this many bushels of this crop, then it makes sense to apply a ton of fertilizer, right? The more fertilizer you apply, the more yield you should get, because the crop has no limit, essentially. Its only limit is the amount of fertility that's available. So as long as you keep applying that stuff, you should just keep getting greater and greater yields. If you subscribe to that philosophy, when prices are good, you can get by. But when prices aren't good, or some kind of disaster befalls your operation, then the checkbook starts to hurt. It doesn't make sense anymore. And in reality, that's not how crops actually grow. It's a lot more complicated than that. There's actually a study. Can you guys still see the cost and nutritional analysis calculator?
Yes.
Okay. I'm still figuring out exactly how screen sharing works. That's fine. And so this was published in 2017, I believe. Yes, 2017. Titled New Grain Phosphorus and Potassium Numbers. Emerson Knapziger from University of Illinois was looking at updating the pounds of nutrient per bushel needed to grow a bushel. And so let me read this article. Sorry, not the article, this paragraph. For this article, the author tested 2,335 corn grain samples over a 3-year period, and the pounds of P2O5, or that's plant available phosphorus, found in 1 bushel of corn is shown in Figure A. According to the author, the pounds of phosphorus used to calculate removal in the state of Illinois is higher than 97% of the values found in the grain tests. So what that means is that of all these 2,335 grain tests that he did, 97% of them required less phosphorus than the book value removal says. Therefore, the author suggested using a new number. So rather than it was 0.43 pounds of phosphorus per bushel is the recommended number, which 97% of the values he found were below that. He suggested 0.37 pounds of phosphorus per bushel of grain corn. Again, this number is higher than 75% of the numbers found by the corn grain tests. Why this number? The farmer has to make his own decision. However, I won't read the rest. We know why, because these numbers make money. Better the numbers you can have, even if it's dropping by 0.08, 0.06 as it's done here, it sells fertilizer, because guys think they need to pour on the fertilizer to get the yield. But of these 2,335 samples that he took, most of them fell below both these numbers in terms of how much phosphorus was actually in them. So clearly that means that the crop does not need as much of a nutrient as we think it does. So a few quotes from this article. While we found a slight correlation between yield and nutrient level in a few cases, Adjusting grain levels based on yield would have made so little difference in the results that using yield level to adjust grain nutrient per bushel was not justified. Grain P and K, so phosphorus and potassium numbers, in some cases were slightly different from one year to another and from one region of Illinois to another, but overall, we couldn't find any consistent effect of location or crop year on nutrient levels. This means that nutrient levels were not clearly tied to anything else about the samples, including where in Illinois the samples came from, which of the 3 years the samples were collected, or to the yield levels of the fields from which samples were taken. So there was no correlation between location, yield, the samples, like the percent, the amount of nutrients in the samples taken. There's no correlation between any of that. It was all variable. Second quote is this: we know from rate studies that adding phosphorus or potassium fertilizer tends to bump up removal rates even when there is no yield response. This could be because roots encounter these nutrients in concentrated form after fertilization and so take up more without really needing the additional amounts. So what that means is that plants will absorb additional nutrients that do not translate to more yield. They just store them in their tissue without actually really using them. And so this kind of defeats the argument that by applying more fertilizer, you can get more yield as a rule. It's not unit in, unit out. That's not how plants work. And the Growers Program has known this since its founding for more than 65 years. It's why we've so focused so heavily on, I'm sure you guys have heard the term targeted fertility used quite a bit. The idea is that we're not trying to provide all or most of the nutrition that a crop needs. We're simply giving it targeted and efficient bursts of nutrition at times when it's stressed and may not be taking that nutrition up through its roots itself as easily. And so, I'm sure you've heard growers guys talk quite a bit about we use growers during stress points, be that germination, reproduction, environmental stresses, or going into or breaking dormancy, transplanting, right? We always recommend using growers, or almost always recommend using growers at stress points in the plant's life. And this is because you can really go a long way with a little bit of efficient fertilizer. You don't need a lot of it. And this is one way that you can help cut costs. You don't need to be applying truckloads of fertility broadcast onto a field or a whole bunch of inefficient liquid even, in the hopes that it's going to bump up your yield. What you need to do is target that fertility, use little amounts. You can get by with quite a small amount, especially if your soil is in order, which we'll get into shortly. Because 96% of plant tissue is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, which come from sunlight, air, and water, not from any kind of fertilizer. 4% comprises the rest of the elements. So we're dealing with a small amount of elements in the plant already. If we can apply some of those elements in a very efficient format when the plant needs it most, you can avoid the losing top yield, I guess you could say, when the plant's under stress, because you're helping it through that stressful period so that it can keep up its yield. And you're also using very little, right? Back to that kind of adage before. If you can't control weather and you can't control commodity prices, you can control your input costs. So if you keep your input costs low by using it efficiently, then whether commodity prices are high or low, it's not going to break the bank. And when they're high, you'll actually make more money because we can certainly compete in yield, but you don't have those high costs keeping up with the high prices. And then when prices are low, you can weather the storm. You don't have a lot in it. You don't need to put a lot in it. And so to follow up on that, using targeted and efficient fertility is only part of the Growers Program and only part of the way that you can increase the efficiency of your farm and keep those input costs low while still growing a very competitive and high quality crop. Another way is, of course, with high calcium limestone and generally with good soil health. Soils contain a lot of natural elements, a lot of natural nutrition, fertility. Not only that, but they have quite a lot of microbiological life, which lives in a symbiotic relationship with the plant. and it provides all kinds of benefits. It seems that every year people are finding more ways that these plants and the life in the soil benefit each other, whether that be nutrient exchange, bringing in water during dry periods, better oxygen, better gas exchange between the crop and the soil, protection against other pests, other microbes that are pathogenic in nature. There's so many benefits, but how do we realize those full benefits? Well, you need to have a healthy soil. Healthy soil needs oxygen in it, which means it can't be locked up. Well, calcium just so happens to flocculate, open up the soil, and allow that oxygen in. This is one of the main reasons why having a high base saturation of calcium in your soil will benefit you in spades more than you spent. I know Joe Henry, I never met the man. He passed away before I joined the company by quite a few years, but he used to say that if you were talking with somebody and they were hesitant to spend money on limestone, you could tell them to cut their fertilizer bill in half and spend that on calcium. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. If you're looking at a return on your investment, fertilizer might give you one season's return on investment. If you get your base saturation of calcium up to 80-85% where it needs to be, then, which is where it needs to be, you're getting that return on investment over many years. Don't look at this as a single year investment or cost. Look at it over, well, it depends how much you're applying, but typically you can look at it over a ton per year, right? So if you're applying 10 tons, that's a 10 ton or 10 year investment, and you're going to get it back in spades. We have countless examples in the company of people who have taken land that has been abused. It's not had calcium applied to it. It's probably just had corn beans for decades, even heavy fertilizer use. It's locked up. It doesn't grow well, doesn't drain water, just in bad shape. And high calcium limestone has turned that field around, made it highly productive, healthy, high quality crops, easier to work. I've heard lots of examples of that. And so you can realize a lot of benefits besides just even soil microbe health. And so it's kind of a perpetual cycle. This is how the Growers Program can help you save money. When you get your soil in order, it'll better support plant life, which, hang on a second. It'll better support plant life. It's going to grow healthier plants. They're going to need less input from you in order to grow healthy because they're getting so much support through the soil, which is now in working order. All you have to do is apply a little bit of fertilizer at specific points in the plant's life to get it through stress points, and you're home free. It's low cost. It's usually quite a bit lower labor. I mean, spraying isn't. Spraying can be a little difficult, I realize. But spraying is also a good way that you can reduce your nitrogen needs because you're giving bursts of nitrogen at specific times rather than front loading it all or knifing it in or whatever the case may be. This is, of course, with corn. This holds true for any crop, whether it be row crops or produce, fruit, nuts, cotton, stuff like that, transplanted tobacco. All of this stuff primarily relies on the soil for a lot of its fertility, for its gas exchange, obviously not for sunlight, but for many of its needs. And if you get that soil in working order, get it flocculated, get oxygen down in there, you get better water drainage. Calcium itself is very good for soil microbes and crops. Then it's gonna benefit you in the long run quite a bit. There are many other ways that the Growers Program can help save money. As I said briefly before, when you're using that fertility targeted times rather than front loading all of it in the beginning of the year, then you can actually cut back. So one example again for corn is, let's say you're using 60 gallons per acre of 28%. If you can get 1 or 2 foliar sprays or growers in, you can actually cut that back to about 45 gallons or more. On one of our pamphlets, there is, I don't remember the specific numbers, I don't have it in front of me, but a family won a corn yield contest, and they hadn't applied a single pound of nitrogen outside of what's in growers to their crop. They had manure, so I guess it came in that. But manure and growers is all they applied. and they got fantastic yield, and I guarantee you that it was a high quality crop too. And so experiment. You can cut your costs immensely. When you have that working healthy soil, you can afford to cut back on fertility for a year a little bit. It's not gonna hurt you a lot because your soil is providing what you need. Now, there's still going to be stress points that could hurt a little bit when the roots aren't taking up nutrition as they should be, but you're a lot less reliant on kind of your own control, I guess, of the situation. I guess I'll stop there and see before I stop my screen share. Does anybody have any questions about the Excel version of the cost and nutrition analysis of the calculator here? Remember, it's click on the microphone, unmute yourself, make sure there's no red line through it. If you're on a phone, it's *6 to unmute yourself.
Hey, Zach, Jim Allbise.
Yeah. Hey, Jim.
Hey, I had a couple guys that learned on the long version.
Yeah.
And then they got the Excel version. And they called me and said that in the availability cell on the Excel version, you should use a whole number rather than a decimal.
Yeah, I know exactly. Right there?
That's correct. Well, I'm not looking at it because I got about 5 semis around me. So,
well, okay. It's in the availability
correct.
index column, right?
Yeah, in the availability column, like on the longhand version, there's a decimal in there, and then you use instead of 10% you use 10% availability, but you multiply by the decimal form. Whereas these guys said, with the Excel, you just put the whole number in there, and then that does the conversion for you. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. So it's if you hover your mouse over it, it'll give you a note that says, when pounds applied are more than 0, then must input a whole number, no decimal, from fertilizer availability index table at the right. So it instructs them. So what you guys should do, excuse me, is the table immediately to the right of where you're doing these calculations is called the fertilizer availability index. It lists different kinds of fertilizers, and then in the column to the right gives their percentage. And so that's in a whole number. Like Jim was saying, usually when you're multiplying by a percentage, you have to do 95% would be multiplied by 0.95. In this case, though, forget the decimal. Just you're doing the 95 because the Excel is calculating it as 0.95. But you just write the 95. And if you try to put in, I'll try to put in I'll do it where there's actually numbers. So if I try to put in 0.95, it gives me an error code. Must input a whole number, no decimal from table at the right. So thanks for bringing that up, Jim, because I run into that too.
Yeah. And the guys that got the Excel are just super happy. I think the guys that are listening tonight, even if you haven't figured out how to do it longhand, you should really work with Zach and get the Excel in there, because again, like you said, it just takes all the labor out of it, and let Zach kind of help you with understanding, how it works, and you're more likely to use it. Because again, the longhand version it's laborious, no doubt about it. And see if that helps you with that. They felt that they had a handle on it, and that this just took all the labor out of it for them. They were super happy with it. Yeah.
And if you're on a sales call, it takes time to get the numbers, do the calculations. Great. Yeah. You can do that. And it's certainly a helpful tool, but if you can get this out there, I mean, you're talking 5 or 10 minutes, not half an hour.
Yeah.
So
and I think their attitude was they still and the number one problem still is that so many farmers don't have a clue what they're doing per acre for them, and if the gentleman doesn't have that clue, they've proposed some ideas from talking with the local suppliers and that to try to get some numbers for them, so that they've got something at least to work with if they approach the gentleman, right in his kitchen table. So,
yeah, DTN can be helpful for that because it's an average too, guys. It's easily accessible too, but especially with prices changing as quickly as they are, it can be hard to keep up.
Yeah, and the availability.
Thanks, Jim.
That availability thing, Zach, is I did it a couple different places, and we had a hypothetical case that we used, and we had no idea what the availability was, and of course, with us staying within our margin and everybody else shooting to the moon, we blew their brains out, in cost per acre, but we were significantly better on the availability too, because they had clipped on the edges to try to get the price down. So this thing is going to be even more helpful, in this situation that we're in now, in my opinion. So
well, it's always been said that growers is too high price per gallon. Well, first of all, you got to break it down into cost per acre, but now we've gone up 57%, not 200. I don't think that argument should hold much water anymore, especially if you actually have a method of showing people that it's not a good argument, but it's not true.
And that's what they revert to is, you put on that dinky amount of stuff, and when you run through the availability and show that that's not the case either, then the whole argument just falls apart. So I think it'd be a fantastic tool for guys to at least get the door open. They're not going to buy in totally in one shot, but at least you got the door open to have the conversation.
Yeah. And I've heard from a number of guys that that's exactly what it's helped them to do. It gets a foot in the door, gets you talking.
Yeah. And your
curiosity.
Your analysis with the University of Illinois data too is very good. That's that's about as current as you can get, and it pretty well says that it doesn't reflect the production. Just that simple. No.
So that's from you, Jim. So I appreciate it. At least that access to that information is from you. So thank you.
Yeah. No. Nice job. Nice job.
Thank you. If there are there any more questions? I'll give a few more seconds for anybody. All right, I will stop sharing. Oh, that's lovely. A big picture of myself right there. Okay, I don't have anything else to share. I know we're a little early tonight, ending a little early. I will say our next conference call is going to be on February 10th. All right, I have a question. How do we go about getting the Excel program? Just contact us at the office and we can send it to you. So I can give my email. I think it's online anyways, but if you contact me, I can send it to you. I know Matt Schoder can as well, but he's usually up to his neck in work right now. So just please try to get it from me. My email though, I'll put it in the chat. Is this. So I can email it to you. You can save it yourself. We might be able to work out sending like a physical thumb drive or something like that. But I think email is probably easiest for most people that are going to use it. And then I'd be happy to go through it with anybody that wants to just kind of give you a rundown on how it works if you're not sure. But I'm assuming that a lot of you are probably better at Excel than I am because I'm not. So I'm willing to help in any way that I can with it though. So to the guy that asked that question, does that answer? Are you able to do that? Awesome. Great. Okay. So then our next conference call will be on February 10th at, again, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And hopefully Jim will be able to come back on with his current events. I'll be hosting it otherwise. But if there's nothing else that anybody would like to add, then we can wrap up the call for tonight. All right. Thanks a lot, Matt, for coming on and giving us an update and rundown on what's going on in the pricing and supply chain areas. And thank you, Jim, for piping in at the end there as well. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope it's been informative and helpful. And have a great night.
Thanks, Zach.
Quite welcome.